it's one thing to have these conceptual opinions of the universe or how it works, or there's a lot of scholarly spirituality. I read this book and I really believe that everything's connected on this fundamental level, or I believe that everything's one. I believe everything's energy. But it's a whole different world when you actually do a practice that brings you right into that world. So, I mean, with Qi energy, Qi is really, from the Chinese point of view, is the fundamental energy of the universe. And Qigong as a practice just shows you directly. So that's the beauty of Qigong, is that it takes away the concept and brings you the experience.
Welcome to the Light Warrior Podcast. My name is Paul Berezetsky, and this show explores spiritual and energetic practices of Qigong, healing using Qi energy, as well as topics related to Taoism, shamanism, plant medicine, alternative health, bodywork techniques, traditional Chinese medicine, martial arts, psychedelics, the nature of consciousness, and more. This episode is brought to you by Show Me Music, the highest quality basses and bass amps, as well as guitar amps, digital mixers, powered speakers, and effects, with brands like Ampeg, Bergantino Audio, Blackstar, Gensler Amplification, Dingwall, and many others. Show Me Music is your premier dealer for the highest in guitar, bass, and audio gear. Check them out online if you're a musician or if you know a musician. ShowMemusic.com, SHOME music.com. My guest on this episode is Ben Rosen. Ben is a licensed massage therapist in the state of Oregon. He graduated from a Western-trained injury treatment massage school in Olympia, Washington, and is currently one of the select few people in the world who have graduated from Grandmaster Michael Lomax's 500-hour clinical Qigong certification program. It is his goal currently to share the healing powers of Qigong with others through teaching and clinical Qigong healing methods. Ben runs a clinic and practice in Portland, Oregon called Portland Clinical Qigong, where he uses Qigong as a healing method and also teaches Qigong to students. For more information, go to www.qiclinicpdx.com, qiclinicpdx.com. Ben and I talk about some of the foundational principles behind Qigong and Qi energy, and Ben helps clear up some of the concepts and lay down some of the groundwork for how Qigong practice and Qi energy is instrumental in healing and the potential of its clinical applications. So please welcome my guest, Ben Rosen. Welcome to the show, Ben. Really good to have you on.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. And you're calling in from Portland, correct?
Yep, Portland, Oregon.
How's
it? A rainy day.
Rainy? Oh, I'm really surprised.
Yep.
Awesome. Last time I saw you was back in October at a Qigong workshop in Colorado with Michael Lomax. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really wonderful experience. It's hard to really capture or captivate the totality of a stillness movement workshop because so much of it is nonlinear, and we could spend the whole hour just talking about what nonlinear means. But it was a very rejuvenating workshop. I learned new skills in clinical Qigong, which is always an amazing thing. And overall, those workshops at this point in my practice really just re-inspire the spark, the passion for why I'm doing this, why I'm doing Qigong every day, sometimes for hours, and why I wake up and try to teach people Qigong weekly and heal people with these Qigong, ancient Chinese clinical healing techniques.
Yeah, absolutely. I find this.
So yeah, we can. Yeah.
I find the same thing after these workshops, is it does kind of reinvigorate you to kind of step up your practice and get into it more actively, and it definitely helps to kind of re-up that that fuel. So you've been with, I guess let's talk about kind of. So Michael Lomax is our teacher, who is the lineage holder of this particular practice, and you've been with him for about 7 years?
Yeah, 7, 8. I mean, I've been with him since 2010, summer of 2010. So.
Okay, so about 7, 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how did you come across it, or what drew you to it?
Well, I mean, my entire backstory with Qigong is just this pretty kind of like synchronistic story where, I mean, so I've always kind of been into practices of this nature. My parents kind of raised me, I mean, I was raised with a Jewish and a Catholic tradition, but they always showed me other ways of, they would teach me about Tibetan Buddhism or Native American spirituality from different tribes, and or just all sorts of cultures from around the world. So I just kind of raised in this environment of all sorts of practices being welcome and encouraged. So sometime in high school, I just came across the concept of Qigong. It was the first time I'd ever heard of it. And I went online and I just read a little bit about it. And then I went on YouTube and I literally just typed in Qigong Master, and the very first video popped up of a Qigong Master. And I clicked it and watched it. And just the thought occurred to me, I just thought, well, where does this Qigong Master live and teach? And it turned out that this Qigong Master, he lived and taught 3 blocks from my house in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
He was on the same street as me, down the street, and he was there my whole time growing up. I never even realized.
Wow.
So in this tiny little office building. So I later that week, me and both my parents, actually, we scheduled a Qigong lesson with this Qigong Master that I saw on YouTube. And that was not Michael Lomax. I won't name names, but he was my first Qigong teacher. And that was my first real introduction to Qigong and the larger world of energy healing. I had never really, I had practiced a little bit with meditation until that point, but really that was my first introduction to this whole world. And really that was the first moment when I first started feeling my first inner energy inside my body and outer energy of the world around me. And I realized, I mean, I think I was with him, that teacher, for about 3 months or so. Mm-hmm. Different factors. I mean, he didn't speak any English. He was very traditional Chinese.
Oh, really?
And,
so
yeah.
How was he?
I couldn't.
How was he really teaching you? Just kind of show and try to follow. I don't know. How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, he would teach a move, and he had an assistant translator who would translate the move. But it felt like there was always this language blockage of not being able to fully ask him a question,
right,
and just kind of taking it for what it was, what he would show me, and then I would try to best emulate it. And beyond that, I mean, that wouldn't have been a factor. That might have not been the sole factor, but the overall factor was the form itself. Something about it, I had never experienced any other Qigong until that point, but something about it felt like I wanted to experience other styles and see what other styles had to offer.
Right, because Qigong is a very, sorry to interrupt, a very, very wide term that encompasses a whole ton of practices. I believe there's like several hundred different types of Qigong, correct?
Yeah, there may even be several thousand at this point.
Oh, wow.
But there's, it's basically just, Qigong is a huge umbrella term for really all energy-based practices at this point that come from China. So it's a huge umbrella for like Taoist, Buddhist, martial art, more medical, all sorts of healing practices, and of all shapes and forms. So I realized I really thank that teacher for introducing me to that world. But then I realized I wanted to explore beyond that. So I kind of went on this like 1.5 year pilgrimage, looking for the right practice. I really wanted to find. It was my intention to find one practice just to really dedicate myself to, and really just go as far down that one path as I could. So I actually explored a lot of different styles in that 1.5 years. I went and saw, like, I even paid for like a private lesson with the top master of this lineage, or I would go to a class here, or I was basically just constantly doing research online or other places, looking for that right style. And at one point, I found myself on the Tao Bums, which is it's a Taoist Buddhist, but mostly Taoist forum online, and a large thing of what they talk about is Qigong and other kinds of practices of these traditions.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on there for just a short time, and very quickly I just started instantly resonating with one person on there, and just everything that person was saying, I was just, wow, that makes sense. This makes sense, and I just started messaging him, and based on what he was talking about, I thought, well, this must be like a little bit more of a senior student of the stillness movement lineage, because he was talking about the stillness movement lineage and he had a pretty good understanding of it. And so I wanted to learn more about this particular Qigong lineage. So I was, me and this one person on there, we were meshing back for actually probably several weeks, having these amazing conversations. And then at some point during that conversation, it just completely dawned on me, like, that, wow, I'm not talking to a senior student of this lineage. I am talking to Michael Lomax, the Grand Master, the lineage holder of this tradition, and I have been talking to him the whole time. So that just kind of blew my mind, and then I at that point I got his book, and then I went to my first Qigong workshop, which was actually a special event. It fell right on Father's Day, and me and my dad both went to that event in Missouri.
Oh,
so
cool.
it was like a fun Father's Day experience. But anyways, that was back in 2010. I haven't really been on the Tao Bums since then, but that was how I found Michael, and it just was, I mean, talking to him, reading the book, and then after my first workshop, I just instantly knew that my prayers were answered, and I found the lineage, the system that I really wanted to dedicate myself to, and that's what I've been doing for these past 7-8 years now.
Did you get to do any? I know Michael has DVDs now. I'm not sure if he had them at the time. Did you get to practice any of the stuff prior to attending a workshop, or was it your first experience was live?
Yeah, I did in fact get a DVD, and that was actually part of my knowing that I wanted the system, because I probably about 6 months before that workshop, I knew. I mean, for maybe like almost a year period, I knew I wanted to see Michael on his workshop, but it didn't work out schedule-wise for almost a year to see him physically. But probably about 6 months prior to that, I did get his Gift of the Tao 1 DVD, and at that point, I mean, like as I said earlier, I had experienced lots of different Qigong styles in my own Qigong journey, looking for the right lineage, right practice, and until that point, that one, just from the DVD, that was the most powerful Qigong form I had experienced at that point. Just feeling Michael's energy from the TV screen and doing the movements, it was such a different vibration and level than I had previously experienced, and that was only confirmed deeper when I actually went to the physical workshop. But yeah,
so that's primarily the difference between Michael's practice and some of the other ones you were doing, is just instantly, just really high powered, kind of more amplified, easier to feel. Yeah, I mean, on one level, certainly. And you can talk deeper about the other aspects that differ in systems. I mean, really, it's, to me, a big part of what really drew me, what Michael was talking about online when I was talking to him and reading about what he was saying, was the difference between nonlinear and linear, and really the aspects where, I mean, maybe I'll talk about that for a moment. I mean, that's a big topic of, really, there's the difference between nonlinear and linear Qigong, and you could really talk about this for any kind of energetic practice. But nonlinear is essentially, I mean, there's lots of words you could put with it, but it's a quantum event. It's there's no limitations on it. So it really, nonlinear follows the dynamics of quantum physics, which, again, really, we're not going to dive too deep into this because we could spend the whole hour just talking about this. But nonlinear is no limitations. And really, this is the level that energy operates on from. There's no limitations on time or space. There's no potential limitations on amplitude, or and it could potentially happen instantaneously. Whereas linear is limited. It has a finite amplitude, has a finite, everything about it has a finite aspect, and it is governed by the agents of time and space. So
my mind's just getting out there because this is such a big topic.
Well,
yeah.
if you want to reel back in a little bit, just for anyone who's listening who may not be completely familiar with these concepts, how would you kind of start talking about Qi energy in the first place and the practice of Qigong?
Yeah, that's a good place to start, and we'll move back into that nonlinear aspect.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, with Qi energy, Qi is really, I mean, from the Chinese point of view, it is the fundamental energy of the universe. And on so many aspects, you can just see how everything is just energy. And Qigong as a practice just shows you directly. So that's the beauty of Qigong, is that it takes away the concept and brings you the experience. So it's one thing to have these conceptual like opinions of the universe or how it works, or there's a lot of scholarly spirituality. So I read this book, and I really believe that everything is connected on this fundamental level, or I believe that everything's one. I believe everything's energy. But it's a whole different world when you actually do a practice that brings you right into that world.
Right.
So that's why Michael Lomax says 1 hour of meditation is better than a lifetime of reading books. And that's not to discount books. I mean, Michael Lomax has a book. Books are very valid tools, but that just shows you that books can only talk around energy, or you can never, and you have to just experience it. And with the Qigong, that allows you to experience the energy for yourself, which is just a vastly different thing when you actually have it in your body, feeling it, versus just on a paper reading about it.
Yeah, and the information you get from reading about it is very useful when you do have those experiences in kind of directing you to what it is you're experiencing. It kind of gives you a context where if you just have the experience, you may not necessarily know where to place it, but if you do know that this is what this is a kind of Qi, this is where it fits in Taoist practices and Taoist philosophy, that kind of gives you like a wider scope.
Oh yeah, and that's why it's highly recommended that you have a physical teacher too. I mean, you don't just learn from a book, because you can only read a book. You can't ask the book questions. So it's good to have a teacher like Michael, or whoever a teacher would be for you, who's been there before, who has an experience of energy and can guide you through there to that point that they've already experienced. Because these are traditions and lineages, and stillness movement lineage is a living lineage that's still alive, that goes back eons, back into ancient Chinese times. And so it means that we don't have to completely refigure out all aspects of energy again. We don't have to completely also like redevelop mathematics. It's already been developed.
Right.
So there's already these systems of energy that have been in the development for countless generations. And right now, stillness movement lineage is the current evolution of where it currently is. And it's an evolving lineage. It's always growing and changing. And Michael Lomax, as the lineage holder, has added so much to this lineage himself. And each master prior to him adds something very valid to the lineage. So that's an example of that.
Yeah, and it really goes back most likely to ancient shamanism, these practices where who knows what that looked like back then.
Yeah, I mean, that is the origins of Qigong, really, is ancient Taoist shamanism, which is really the indigenous spirituality of China. And really, at the fundamental level, the Taoist view that nature is already in sync. Nature is the Tao. So nature is already in sync with the universe. And this is an example. This could actually show an example of how stillness movement lineage is a little bit different than other lineages. Because most Qigong does this, where they copy patterns of nature. Like they'll take a tiger or a tree or a mountain and so many different aspects of nature, a crane, and they'll view that animal and how it's moving, and they'll base the Qigong movement based on that animal or other form of nature, like a river. And that's completely a valid technique, because the tiger is already in tune with the Tao. It's just already in sync. It's already in the flow. And us human beings we have so much free will, we can just kind of very easily get out of that flow. So Qigong is a way of helping you get back in harmony with the Tao, with creation, and on an energetic level. And with Gift of the Tao Qigong, it's also copying patterns of nature, but their gift of the Tao Qigong is a bit unique because it goes straight direct to the energy. So it's all based on nonlinear, and we kind of talked about nonlinear, but we can maybe talk about that more later. But nonlinear, not limited by finite concentrations or finite amplitudes. Nonlinear energy patterns that Michael Lomax viewed over the course of, I believe, 10 years or so, or a decade of really working with these energies. And these are energies that existed naturally in the stillness movement lineage that was transmitted to him by Master Wang Zhumain, excuse me. And Michael Lomax, working with past ascended masters and his own connection with spirit, he formulated the Gift of the Tao Qigong moves, every single move of the Gift of the Tao series. And right now there's Gift of the Tao 1, 2, 3, and even 4 is in the development right now. Every move is based on these nonlinear energy patterns that are shown in higher states of consciousness, whether it's in meditation, dream time, that are given from the lineage to be created. And that's one of Michael's big contributions to the Qigong system is the Gift of the Tao Qigong movements. So that's an example of how with the tiger, that's kind of like a middleman. You're copying the tiger, and the tiger is copying a very specific energy pattern, and then Gift of the Tao is just going straight to a very specific energy pattern.
Right. It's kind of interesting to think how pretty much everything in nature follows the Tao, but for some reason, or like you said, we have too much free will, I guess, that it's hard to find a person and say, oh, this guy is the Tao. I'm just going to copy him. I guess maybe a couple of, Lao Tzu or Jesus or something. But yeah, it's very hard to find a guy like that to follow.
Yeah. Well, I think that's actually the beauty of, not to tangent too much, but I think that's one of the beauties of humanity is that, a tiger is already doing its thing. Tiger's very much doing tiger medicine or tiger. Tiger's doing that. But humanity, we have the beautiful ability to copy the tiger medicine or the hawk medicine or go direct to direct to source medicine. And that's what gets the Tao is its direct source medicine. But we have the power to pick and choose, and really our medicine is all medicine based on our own intent and our own free will or will power.
How important would you say it is to kind of be well versed in some of the philosophies of Taoism in this practice? Do these things need to go hand in hand? Can you kind of do one without the other?
Yeah, well, I would say and this might be a radical statement for some lineages out there, but it's completely unnecessary to be a scholar in any sense working with this lineage. I mean, there are very high-level practitioners in this lineage doing very profound healing work and at a very high stage of inner Taoist cultivation, and they have done zero. I mean, I have done a little bit of my own research just personally, but there are, as I'm saying, there's people in our lineage who have done absolutely no Taoist homework, doing the scholarly work or learning about on the fundamental levels what's going on with the Dantians. That's because, I mean, look, everything is done through the practice. So all the things that the Taoists talk about are naturally occur anyways, whether you know about them or not, because that's the practice. It just unfolds with the practice, and in some ways, it's actually better to come in with a clean slate, with a blank slate, because a lot of times you can have, if you're too scholarly, you can have too many expectations that will be a blockage that you have to actually burn through. Mm-hmm. Because here's one of the problems with the scholarly approach is that, kind of like what we were saying back previously of like, books can only talk around something. It's better just to, it's infinitely better just to go straight to the experience. But even beyond that, we have all these scholarly books now of Taoism, and I think I'm not going to discredit any of that, really. It's all very beautiful things. But something to understand about that is that these are retranslated who knows how many times over from these ancient traditions. And there is an aspect of cultural, certain things that are very specific to Chinese culture, especially ancient Chinese culture, gets lost in it can get lost in translation, especially when it comes to the Western front.
Or people put their own spin on it, like you said, based on their culture that they're in, or just their own personal inclinations. A good example is the I Ching. If you ever try to read the I Ching, there's 20 different translations of them, and you read one translation and it says one thing, and you read another translation and it says completely the opposite.
Exactly, and part of the problem of that too is that you have these scholars that are very, they're very scholarly in terms of academics, but they have never done Qigong in their life. So they've never truly experienced the energy. They've just read about the energy. And here they are writing about the energy, having never experienced it. Mm-hmm. So there's a big difference between a scholar practitioner or a practitioner scholar who, and when you go back to ancient China, these were guys that were writing about this stuff. They were writing this stuff after years and years of deep energy cultivation. So how can you possibly retranslate and accurately portray what these people were talking about when it came from a source of deep energy alchemy cultivation and you have never experienced what energy is like? So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the problem is if you have experienced that, it gets harder and harder to write about it accurately. That's why if you try to read the Tao Te Ching, it's just a bunch of really mystical stuff that's very hard to understand with your brain.
Exactly, too, because going back to that nonlinear thing, which is probably going to be a recurring theme, but all energy experiences are nonlinear, really. So, So how can you ever, you can only talk around it. You can never fully accurately portray a nonlinear experience through a linear form of communication like writing or talking. You have to just experience it and go direct. And that's what Qigong is about, is going direct to the energy, direct to your own experience. And all the things they talk about, all the different inner alchemy goals, they're all achieved through the practice and you experience it yourself. And that's the beauty of it. And reading about it can be helpful. I don't want to detract from that, but there's a big difference between someone who only reads and doesn't practice and someone who practices. Like going back to your original question, you can do the practice and it's completely not necessary to do the scholarly homework behind it. That can give you a little extra richness and depth to what you are experiencing, but having a good teacher, he or she will guide you through it, and it's really unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of layers to this practice. So one of them is, self-actualization, getting in tune with nature, with yourself, with the Tao. And then the big part of it that Michael is focusing on is actually clinical applications, is healing. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that as far as what your first experiences with that were. How is that something you were looking at when you were just getting into Qigong, or were you looking at it originally more for like self-actualization and got into the healing stuff later on?
I think from the very start, especially even learning about the clinical Qigong aspect, the second I learned about it, I knew I wanted to do it. It wasn't maybe until 2 or 3 years into doing the stillness movement lineage and coming to these workshops that it really set in, and what I kind of knew all along, but at that point it really set in of, this is my life path, this is what I want to do and give to people. But even from the very beginning, I knew I at least wanted to be a family healer and just heal friends and family, and it only continuously blows my mind just the effectiveness of it. I would not be doing this today if I didn't fully experience and see the results in person, that this is one of the most profound clinical practices on earth right now, or it's really an ancient practice that has been kept alive and is being reintroduced now on a more public level. You asked about my first experience. My first experience was at my very first workshop, and really this is a profound example of where we're going with Qigong. Qigong's a developing thing, so back in ancient China, or not even that long of China, maybe 200 years ago, 150 years ago, you would have to do Qigong for 3 years before you were even going to start projecting a lot of times. Maybe 1 to 3 years of deep work, building up your own energy before you even thought about giving it to others. And then you would only, maybe after 10 years, be having some really serious results with it. I mean, that kind of figure is going to change with a lot of people, but that was kind of a standard amount of time, especially for the amount of time it would take before you first start building up your energy, before you start giving to others. But So at Michael Lomax's workshops, this is a Neigong, and it's taught by a Qigong projection, a nonlinear base. I'm going to keep saying that word. It's a nonlinear base energy projection. That is the lineage transmission. So there's so much, we could spend the whole hour just talking about that almost, but that by doing that does so many things. It gives you all the lineage teachings that are necessary for you in that moment. It also deeply raises your own energy vibration rate. It helps, it actually creates the Dantian field. So that's part of what I was saying. It takes about a year of deep practice, maybe even 1 to 3 years, to create this Dantian field. And a high-level teacher, Michael Lomax is in this category. There might be others in this category, can actually, through their own energy projection, create this Dantian field right there for you. And it's up to you as the student to not take that for granted, to go home and if you keep the practice going, then that Dantian field stays in your body, and it only develops. It's like a seed that grows and activates your whole energy body. But that's a bit of a tangent. But essentially, because of that aspect, you can go to one workshop. So my very first workshop with Michael Lomax, I did a clinical Qigong session, which, like I'm saying, is pretty much unheard of before in
like
most
10 years
of
of practice.
Yeah, exactly. And the kind of results that people are having now is phenomenal. Even Michael has noticed this. People in the 70s, the energy work that human beings were able to do is stronger, and it's like a curve going up, and people can do more energy work faster now. And that's speaking more to the evolution of humanity as a whole. But sorry to keep having tangents, but essentially going back to that, my very first workshop 7 or 8 years ago, I was working with someone who had been in the system for a long time. He was a more advanced student. He had some shoulder pain, and he was a chiropractor. And I did I'd never done energy healing in my life. I did what Michael told me to do, and used my energy and using the techniques from the system. And he said that I easily helped reduce his pain by 70% in a probably a 10-minute session. So that just I actually it was actually a pretty emotional event for me. I started shedding some tears because I didn't even know if I could do it, and that was just like such a to have this advanced student who was also a chiropractor tell me that I had just, in 10 minutes or so of doing this, 70% of his pain in his shoulder was reduced. And people spend, people go through therapy for months and spend countless of hundreds of dollars for a shoulder pain incident like that.
Mm-hmm. And at really no cost. You're not taking any medications. There's no any kind of physical injury or potential insult to the body. It's pretty much just no down. If it works, it's no downside.
It's amazing. And if you want, I can share the one story that really set in the healing potential for Qigong for me. I was this was probably about a year after that event. I was doing. I of course kept the practice going and still do. And I was just walking. I think I was walking to a breakfast place, and I was walking with my friend who kind of believes in energy healing but didn't fully. And I was walking, and walking along. We hear this really. It was this very hard to hear chirping. Hard to hear as in it sounded like this bird was in deep pain, and it was like almost screeching. And we walked on along the path, and we found this little it was like a baby bird that it looked like it had fallen off the nest, and it was currently it was like rolling around one leg. It looked like it had hurt one leg, and immediately I just instantly started going into energy projection without really thinking about it. I started projecting straight to the leg and pulling out the sick chi as we do in the system, and almost immediately what I noticed was that the bird stopped rolling around. It was rolling around very violently. It stopped rolling around and rolled right underneath my fingertips, right where I was projecting. And within 30 seconds, I actually heard the bird let out like a sigh. It went, and its eyes closed. And probably about 2 minutes of doing that, I felt like it was done. I had done what was needed. And the bird changed from this very panic attack state of pain to it was breathing slowly and deeply. Its eyes were closed. It actually allowed me to gently pick it up, and I took it off the main path and put it in the bushes. I don't know what happened to that bird after that, but I left the scene with the bird just in obviously less pain, if not complete removal of that pain at that moment for that bird.
Yeah.
And to me, Michael Lomax says that that animal. So these techniques work on animals, and that really proves the validity of these techniques. I mean, an animal doesn't have a placebo effect,
right?
So
exactly.
Michael has done healings on goats and horses, and you can. I mean, all beings of the Tao, you can do this on. You can do this on trees even. We've done tree healings in this system, but that's just an example. After that moment, healing that bird, it just set in like, wow, just how amazing and unbelievable these healing techniques are. And of course, you never know what's going to happen with a Qigong healing. Sometimes the results are a little bit less, and sometimes they're almost these miraculous results. Many times, a profound difference is made. So yeah, I mean, I'm very passionate about continuing to deepen with this practice because of these healing experiences for myself and for others that I've experienced so far. Yeah,
and I've experienced it myself. The way I found Michael is through my own personal health challenges. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma that I was battling for a couple of years, and at the end of it, I ended up doing chemotherapy, and it really damaged my hip joints. And I was suffering with that for several years, where I couldn't really get around, couldn't walk. I was on crutches most of the time. And really the only thing that mainstream medicine had to offer was double hip replacement surgery on both hips. And I was really trying to avoid that. But I was pretty much at the end of my rope, and I was I tried a bunch of alternative stuff, and nothing really was sticking that much. So I was kind of ready to throw in the towel. And I also found out about Michael through my mom. Actually, she was very active on Tao Bums. I believe she was a moderator at the time, and and so she kind of brought that to my attention, and I had one of these really crazy kind of like miraculous things where I went to the workshop. Actually, first, Brian Beller, Michael's senior student, did a remote distance healing session on me, and I felt an improvement within a couple of days, and I was really intrigued at that point, and that kind of prompted me to go to the workshop, and I had Michael kind of used me as a demonstration dummy for the techniques, and it was a huge improvement pretty much right away. Like I got off the table, I could walk around easier. A huge reduction in pain. I didn't really need the crutches, and I gave myself an allowance of sure, whatever, this could be placebo effect. And it's surrounded by all these people with all these expectations, and I have expectations, so whatever, we'll see how it goes. But it stuck. It stuck, and I did the practice as well. I started practicing every day, and the improvement hung in there, and it was just getting better and better, and I'm pretty much back to mostly normal activities right now. It's really kind of crazy, and I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain with any kind of rational, reasonable stuff. But like you said, it's non-linear, straight to source energy stuff. It's as good an explanation as I can muster, I guess.
Yeah, and it does make sense when you really get into the biology of it, looking at the way the nervous system works. And so much of what we do is working through the nervous system's bioelectrical source of energy in the body. But
if your body had the map of how to allocate resources, maybe it could heal itself more efficiently, and maybe in a lot of cases that's what's missing. And this is what
say that? Yeah.
The way I think about it is your body probably has a lot of capacity for self-healing, but maybe for whatever reason, those pathways aren't available. The body isn't able to figure out how to do this. So by activating this chi energy state, it kind of almost gives your body the intelligence, like a piece of software that you're loading into the system that will tell it how to go about healing it and restoring homeostasis.
Yeah. That's a very good analogy, actually. I mean, really the nervous system, the electrical nervous system, is kind of like the interface that links our energy body, our vibrational energy body, with the physical body. So so with the qigong, we it's as above, so below. So we emulate these higher level energy patterns, or in a qigong healing, we are giving someone this higher level energy, and it goes into the body, which then feeds into this nervous system interface and raises the energy body vibration rate, and then it translates down the pathways into healing on all levels of the biological, physical level,
so
the organs and everything.
Right. So I think of it in terms of not just energy, but energy and some kind of intelligence.
Oh, sir. Yep. Definitely.
Almost like a piece of software. Like a piece of software is essentially it's electrical impulses. So that's the basic energy of it is electricity. But then there's a code of it. There's a sequence of zeros and ones that are going to arrange that electricity in a certain pattern and make it execute a certain kind of function. So that's kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah. I think there's so many different ways you can look at all this, and one of them is on this very technological level. And then, but it's important to also realize that there's always going to be a mystery element to the Tao, to qigong, to energy.
Mm-hmm.
We can only know so much as beings in these bodies with our tools.
That's
there's
true.
always going to be just the element of the unknown, which is part of the magic and the beauty of qigong, is that you don't know what to expect. I mean, it always helps and makes a difference, and that's why it's important to let go of our expectations and just fall into our expectations. Keep us in the linear and the finite, and by letting go of those and surrendering to the qigong and the unlimitless source, then that's when the real magic comes through.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of difficult, though. You always have to be on guard with this kind of stuff because there's so much woo-woo out there, and so much of it is, just whacked out. So you do have to be cautious. So and the thing that I've noticed and that I really like about the group of students that Michael has assembled, that it's pretty much it's not really anyone I can think of that's too much of like a woo-woo type. Like, it's kind of people are like intelligent, scientific, rational, skeptical even, and you kind of have to be in it, but you still have to be open-minded to the experiences that you receive. So with that in mind, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, you're fine.
I was going to say, with that in mind, I do see you and a bunch of other people always posting like really cool links to articles on Facebook and stuff as far as kind of some new scientific breakthroughs that seem to kind of confirm some of these more, esoteric notions. Have you come across anything recently that's an exciting kind of piece of research that points to, where you could scientifically point to some of this stuff and say this is actually conforming to the laws of physics?
Yeah, I mean, just what comes to mind is some medical research that shows. I mean, our medical understanding for a long time was that the brain is the seat of consciousness. The brain has all the neural connections of the body, and we're finding out that that's simply not the full story now. We're finding out now that we're calling the gut and the heart the second, like the two other brains of the body. Mm-hmm. The heart and our gut has don't quote me on this, but just as much or almost as much neural connections as our physical brain, mm-hmm. each of them. Mm-hmm. And so that's and each of them. So there's a huge interplay dance between all these different systems of the gut, the heart, and the brain. And they're saying that emotional memories are actually could be stored in the heart, not only the brain. Or our gut has a big role in our consciousness and our willpower. And that's what Qigong has been saying. Tao Qigong has been saying since the beginning is that we have three Dantians, and our lower Dantian, that's the one I was referencing earlier. It takes about a year to 3 years traditionally, or one lineage projection from a high level teacher can just create this field. And
just to
so
back up for a second, Dantian would be analogous to an energy center or something like a chakra, correct?
Yeah, it's a little bit different than, we work with the energy centers in the system too. The Dantians are kind of like, are the specified very special centers. So lower Dantian is the sea of chi. That's where all the energy is stored. And it's kind of just, that's like the center of your whole self. Mm-hmm. And then your heart is where Shen is stored. Not to go deep into Chinese theory, but heart is where really your true self lives in your heart. And then your mind, that's Dan Mu. That's the upper Dantian that really connects you with your talents and gifts. So it's so limited to only look at your brain exists in your top of your head and your mind. What Qigong does is it helps transform your experience, and you can start living from your heart, living from your gut, living from your Dantian, your lower Dantian. And on a biological level, it makes sense to start doing this, placing your awareness on these different centers. I mean, in Qigong, we just place our awareness on the lower Dantian, and then all the energy rises and naturally activates all these different centers. And right now, specifically, these three Dantians, basically the three brains of the body. And by building up these electrical signals in your body in these areas, it's just confirming on a biological nervous system level how Qigong goes about its healing and inner alchemy transformation by transforming these electrical signals and places of energy in your body. So
the kind of central point to a lot of these practices is basically that where you focus your attention is very important, and essentially energy follows where your attention is focused, correct?
Correct. And if I can talk about how, in our system, we use something called intent for that. Mm-hmm. So this is a big differentiating point between our system and, from what I can see, many, many other systems of the energy healing world, even outside Qigong, is that many systems fall into the category of using visualization. And in this system, we use something called intent. So Michael Lomax defines intent as that through which manifestation occurs utilizing energy. So it's pure creation using the energy in your body. So this is a nonlinear event. This is beyond limitations of finite amplitude, and so an active intent has no limitations on the amplitude of how powerful it can be. There's no limitations on that, or of how fast it can be. It could be instantaneous, even affecting past, present, and future. So there's really just absolute no limitations on that. And then when you bring visualization into the game, into the picture, visualization is a finite practice. It's very much using the mind in this energy creation. And what's happening is visualization. You can measure finite brain waves. Brain is one of the most powerful things in the universe, most likely, but it still is finite, and you can measure these finite brain waves. So visualization is this linear process, and really you can an analogy to intent really is like language. Like I'm speaking to you right now, because I don't have to visualize a single word before I say it. I just simply say it, and I'm just in the moment of the moment, full intention of what I want to convey. Mm-hmm. And it would actually be a speech impediment if I had to visualize every word before I said it. So that's essentially how this system views energy, is that with visualization, there's certainly nothing wrong with it. It's actually a very valid method. But it has that finite aspect to it. And it acts as that impediment, the impediment that keeps you from reaching that unlimited source of energy. That's the true nature of energy, is just nonlinear, no limitations. And by just going straight, direct, using intent is this thing that you can only really talk around. It's another thing, it's like energy. It's its own thing. You have to just experience working with energy in this way. And it's like a muscle you have to build up. The more you work with intent, the more it develops, and that's where we do our healings from in this system, is from this place of intent. And the best analogy for it I have is like language. So just like in the moment of the flow, but it's something that has to just be learned, and and embody through the practice.
That's very interesting. This intent is something we have as far as moving our body or using our words. It's just something you don't think about it. You know how to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's essentially it's some kind of the same impulse, only instead of doing something like moving your arm or making a noise with your mouth, like in the external world, you're using kind of the same spark to affect something on the level of manifestation.
Exactly. Really. I mean, we all have intent and we all have energy. We're all alive, and because of that, we all have it. But it's something to develop. And actually, movement is another great example of that. I mean, just imagine if someone came up to you and told you, imagine a world where you could only move your limbs or only speak words if you visualized it first. I mean, you have to like visualize your arm moving and then you could do it.
Right.
But we don't. That's not how it works. I reach for my Coca-Cola, or I reach for this. I don't really drink Coca-Cola, but I just reach for something, or I just talk. And so it's silly to bring energy is another part of us, just like our body, just like our language. Energy is us. So it's silly to think that we have to visualize every aspect of it before engaging in it. We should just, or the way to do it without limitation, without impediment, is just to do it in the act of the act. And I lost my thought.
Well,
but yeah, that's essentially it.
So actually, a large part of Qigong practice is movement. There is movement to it. I mean, there's the stillness part of it, and then there's the physical ones. What is the connection there? Is that, would you say that the physical movements are almost kind of like training wheels, like a bridge to get you to your energy body movement? Why is the physical movement necessary?
That's a very good question. So I would say both parts are necessary. So like in our stillness movement lineage, there's a sitting and a standing, meditation where you just go very deep into it. But then we also have the gift of the Tao movements, which are the movement forms of the practice. And you can look at Qigong movements of any system as like imagining your arms and our legs as like our radio antennae. So we are electrical beings. And by positioning our arms in these different ways with these different energy intents, as we just talked about, we can access these energy patterns just like a TV set, and we're the radio trying to find the right signal, the right frequency. So in these gift of the Tao Qigong moves, each movement is very much formulated to a very specific energy pattern, very specific energy frequency. And by formulating your movements to this pattern and repeating that pattern over and over again in these meditative states using these intents, you can access and embody these patterns, and that raises your energy body vibration rate, which goes down the levels of your biology and translates to healing. And then other systems might emulate the movement of a tiger, like I said earlier, or a tree, and that's copying the energetic pattern and medicine of a tiger or a tree, and that's in turn coming into your body through that radio antennae aspect. So
now a lot of this has to do with workings with yin energy and yang energy, with heaven and earth chi. How does that fit into everything?
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back to that aspect of the scholarly versus the practitioner, in terms of it can add extra depth and richness to your practice to understand the fundamentals of what you're doing. In terms of the yin yang in each move. But it also, I mean, you actually don't have to. You can just do the movements as they're taught, and it all happens naturally. So the yin and yang will naturally balance in your body through these movements, and you'll access these different energies. And basically every Qigong move, I can only speak of the Qigong in this tradition because it's the one that I follow, but virtually every move in this Gift of the Tao Qigong system involves harmonizing and bringing balance to above and below, heaven and earth, yin and yang energies within your body and around you. So, so that's, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how we work with it.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, so what you're doing is bringing them in balance, essentially, because there's, like you said, almost every move has a component of mixing heaven and earth somehow. So it seems like a fairly important aspect of it.
That's, I mean, when you Michael Lomax has said that the human being, we are essentially like the ebb and the flow. We are like the beating heart between heaven and earth. So many, all of Chinese medicine really is about correcting energetic imbalances, whether it's through needles or herbs or Qigong, which is one of the 5 branches of Chinese medicine. And we're talking about Qigong. So Qigong, it's about balancing that energy. And there's a flow, there's a channel between us and heaven and us with earth below. And by correcting that imbalance, by helping strengthen that flow, that we strengthen the conduit between above and below, heaven and earth, it in turn allows our internal energy to flow, to not be blocked, to access our organs and come to the places that need healing in our body.
Mm-hmm. So that's essentially the key to everything, is basically removing blockages and subtracting, kind of like Lao Tzu is talking about. You're always trying to subtract until you kind of get to the natural essence of things. So yeah, you're basically trying, like, the natural flow should be there, and just it seems like a lot of life that we're thrown into creates blocks for various reasons, and you have to always kind of go back and try to remove those and just reinforce that flow.
Oh yeah, stress is a real thing, and stress on our body on all levels affects this flow. And we're talking about the connection between our 3 dantians. Are basically when all our dantians are in harmony with each other, that's when health is achieved. So and all the other channels and meridians and centers. So this Qigong, when you do a session of Qigong, what happens is you don't have to worry about any of this. It's fun to talk about it like we're doing right now.
Right.
But when you do a session of Qigong for yourself and do all the movements, what happens is you bring in all this higher level energy through accessing these different patterns of energy, as we talked about earlier. And what happens is all this energy goes into your body and it does all the things we're talking about. So it will open up channels. It will help strengthen the flow between lower and middle dantian. It will help release the stagnant stick energy that's causing the pain in your left shoulder, and help that to flow better and just purge that out of yourself. So it will the Qigong, all things come about naturally through the Qigong practice, and that comes to one of the quotes of the Tao, which is nature does nothing, yet nothing is left undone. Mm-hmm. So that's a true Qigong practice. That is what will happen, is that you don't have to worry about the practice or worry about these aspects of it. You just do the practice and nothing is left undone. Mm-hmm. It is all achieved. And not in one session, but over the course
right.
of doing it, it will in its own time activate and rebalance all these different energy channels and centers.
It's what Michael calls dancing in the Wu Wei.
Well, that's a little bit different concept, but that's related, of course.
That's actually one of the other things that is really, I think, attractive to me, at least about Michael's practice, is everything is very natural. It's safe, because there's a bunch of these practices out there that get into some funky stuff where you're forcing energy down channels and shooting energy into your brainstem or whatever, and those can have some pretty adverse consequences if you don't know what you're doing.
I would agree. I would say there's a big difference between a forceful Qigong method and a non-forceful method. Stillness movement is completely non-forceful. Mm-hmm. And really getting into that ideological differences is that it's also the difference between visualization and intent a lot of times. Because, for example, if there's a Qigong move we do where we bring energy from the Lao Gong is the energy center of the hand, and we use our intent, we bring that energy in, and we bring it to our dantian, which is beneath the navel. So if you were using visualization to achieve that, and that's not how we do it, but if you were doing visualization, you would imagine the energy coming into your Lao Gong at your palm, and you would imagine it moving up your arm to your shoulder, down your torso and then reaching your dantian. And see, the problem with that in that approach is, and that would be a more forceful approach. You're forcing the energy to go a certain way. And you're also doing it in this finite manner. You're not letting the energy really blossom into its full potential of unlimitedness. And what's happening here is that you're forcing it down a certain pathway with your mind, and the energy in itself has its own innate intelligence. I think we referenced that earlier. Energy kind of is intelligence, energy. And so this energy already knows exactly what way to flow in your body. It knows what channels to go up to. It knows exactly which ways is the most efficient. It flows like water. Mountain, you don't have to tell the water how to flow. It just will flow in the most efficient manner possible. And that's what the energy, if you let it, so with intent, we don't do that visualization forceful method. We just set that creation aspect. I'm not going to re-explain intent. We explained that earlier, but we use that intent, and we just fully let go and allow that energy to travel as it knows best to the place of the dantian. And what you find is that in that style of doing it, it is exponentially more powerful, and it has far less chance of causing actually unwanted stagnation in these more forceful methods. So there's a lot of methods using a more forceful way to force the microcosmic orbit, which is we have lots of orbits that other Qigong systems don't even talk about, or other practices don't talk about, because there's all these different orbits, not just the microcosmic orbit. There's so much of the energy body that hasn't been mapped out yet. But there's a lot of practices out there that's what they do. It's a big part of their practice is to visualize this microcosmic orbit flowing around your body. And that, going back to that same analogy, that's one of the problems with that, is that when, for example, in this system, we just allow that orbit to come about naturally on its own accord. We just do the practice and let nothing is left undone. So by doing the practice, the energy in itself will form that orbit when it is time. And just like you never force your middle dantian, your heart, to open, or you never force the solar plexus, any of these centers to open, you let it open on its own accord when the energy will open it when it's ready. So that's, you can create problems if you try to force these orbits or these centers to open before their own time. So by just allowing the energy to do as it knows best, it'll be the most efficient manner. You'll actually save time. The energy, these channels and these centers will open more effectively and sooner than if you try to force them, which by forcing them, that could take you back down. You could lose progress, because then from the stagnation that you may have created for yourself.
Yeah. Excellent point. Kind of get out of your own way almost. Before we wrap up, can you talk a little bit about your practice that you started? You've opened a clinic, I believe, in Portland, where you actually do these treatments on people. How can people find out about that?
Yeah, my business is just called Portland Clinical Qigong. My website is www.qiclinicpdx.com. That's QI clinicpdx.com. And you'll find me and what I do. I teach a weekly class. I teach Gifts of the Tao movements, which is what we've been talking about. And I also do private sessions of the clinical Qigong. So people will see me for about an hour session, and I will work on whatever is needed energetically. And just like that bird story earlier, I'll just work with what the person's energy body needs at that moment. And we could spend a whole another hour just talking about clinical Qigong, or another another year.
And we'll definitely like to do this again and dig into some of these things a little deeper. We also didn't really touch on the lineage with Master Wang Jaemin and Dr. Grafe. That would be another probably hour discussion all on its own.
Yeah.
Definitely would love to do this again. Any kind of final thoughts? If someone's kind of interested in this, where would be a good place to start, you'd think?
Okay. Well, my website has a lot of info about Qigong, about how it works. I also offer distance sessions. I work with people all over the world. My website also has a link to to Michael Lomax's website, which is Qigong America, and that would be a great place to start. Is looking at Michael Lomax's book. If you're interested in this system and everything that we've talked about, I would highly recommend checking out. It's called The Light Warrior's Guide to High Level Energy Healing, A Shaman's Vision in Medical Qigong. Just look up Michael Lomax Qigong, and you'll be able to find his book. And that would be a great place to start. That book is not necessarily a how-to Qigong book, which I advise to some degree against those how-to Qigong books, because how can you accurately portray these deep energetic movements just through a book? Mm-hmm. But this book it actually gives you, it will give you a step-by-step way to do the practice. But even beyond that, it will be a deep dive into all the things we talked about today, and as well as the lineage. And really, that book in particular goes beyond just and takes it to what we're really doing here on this energetic level that goes beyond time and space, even beyond humanity. So, yeah, that'd be a good place to start. And I'll say, if anyone hears this and reaches and sees my website and has questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email. I'm happy to help on a personal level answer questions about Qigong. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there, so I'm happy to be that, to help people, guide them in introducing them to this big world of energy, if people are interested. So yeah,
awesome, great. Thanks for talking to me today. This, I think, was a pretty good way to kind of get into this stuff and kind of lay down some of the groundwork, and hopefully some people can get interested in this and use this conversation as a jumping off point. So great talking to you, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. It was great being here, and be excited to dive into some of those other topics like the lineage or clinical Qigong in the future.
Yep. I'll love to have you back on again. Thanks, Ben.
Great. Thanks, Paul.
There you have it. That was Ben Rosen. If you guys are interested in more information about this practice or about Ben's clinic and his practice, you could find more information at qiclinicpdx.com. That's Ben's website. That's qiclinicpdx.com. Ben teaches Qigong classes. He's based out of Portland, Oregon. He does Qigong healing on clients. If you are in the area and this is resonating with you, definitely reach out to him. And if you're elsewhere in the world and you're still think that Ben could help you with anything, he does do distance healing sessions as well, so you could check that out. So check out his website, and thanks for tuning in to the Light Warrior podcast. We'll catch you next time with more cool interviews.